Good afternoon, Tuscaloosa. Good afternoon, Tuscaloosa, Internet World, West Alabama, right here in downtown Northport, just a mile or two away from Bryant-Denny Stadium. Everybody who's watching the Joe Gaither Show on BamaCentral and BamaCentral.com. I am, of course, Joe Gaither. You're watching us on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter. You're listening to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on Amazon. Go tell a friend about the program. We've had a fun week so far this week. We're going to continue to have a fun week. It's a football Friday, so we're breaking down the weekend. We're, 29, 30-something hours away from Alabama kicking off against Mississippi State on Saturday night, 8 o'clock over there in Starkville. We want to thank everybody who's watched us already this week and encourage you to follow our other Bama Central Broadcasting Network podcast, Blue Collar Unplugged. Our friend Matthew Gibson, Blake Byler, and Jacob Pickle giving you all things Alabama basketball related. They'll bring a new episode very, very soon. Probably going to talk about Aiden Sherrill, his recent commitment. So we're going to but we're not going to talk about basketball today. It's Football Friday. That's what we do on Football Friday. We're going to talk about Alabama and Mississippi State and the other SEC matchups this weekend. We're going to have our friends Katie Wyndham, Austin Hannon. We'll probably have Wyatt Fulton join us in a little while. And you can, of course, follow them and their coverage. They're going to be on site in Starkville tomorrow. And so they're going to be all giving you the boots on the ground. I'll play home base right here in Tuscaloosa, helping them out how I can. But we're very, very happy today, very honored to welcome in our guest from the Boneyard podcast. We're going to bring in Mr. Steve Robertson joins us today. You can follow Steve on the Twitter machine at ScoutSteveR. He is the host of the Boneyard podcast, and I just listened to his episode today breaking down Alabama. You want to do that to get ready for the matchup tomorrow to see kind of the other side perspective, and I'm very happy to bring him on. Steve, thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. It's been an eventful stretch for me. I've laid my head in 5 states in 7 days and welcomed a new granddaughter to the world. And now we get the pleasure of covering college football for a weekend. So,
yeah, I heard that on your on the very first part of your show, Lily Ray. Is that correct? New granddaughter?
Yes, yeah, exactly right. We're from the South, so we're okay with the 2-name child, so.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations. That's awesome. That's always a joy, and I'm sure you're happy to be back in Starkville after traveling so much.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing too. I tell people all the time, man. We get so caught up in all that we do, but it's like, man, I get to cover college athletics for a living. Yeah, I mean, like, what in the world do I have to be angry about? I mean, there's so many people in my profession, some of which are my friends. There's all this angst and everything else, and I'm like, guys. We get to watch college football. We get to watch college baseball. We get to interview the coaches and the players and be the eyes and ears for our fans and so many people that care about all this in this great conference of ours. So, yeah, I mean, I could cut my hair and go get a real job, but I'm having too much fun doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Monday we had we had 4 sports holding press conferences, and I didn't mind. We had men's and women's basketball, we had baseball, and then of course football for their normal noon press conference. And not to call out my colleagues, but why can't they do it all on separate days? I'm like, what? I mean, it was all lined up in a row. It was easy. It was great. We could be digging ditches or, doing sales calls or doing something monotonous and mundane, but a lot of fun to talk to the coaches and the athletes that we all love.
Well, whenever anybody wants to get out, there are thousands of people that would love to take their spot, and that's the thing that I always think about. I've been writing about Mississippi State since 1997, and I've been with this entity since 2001, so 22 years with the same company, being able to cover the team that I love and the conference that I revere so much, and I get to travel around here and go to all these great venues and there's so many great fans, and that's the thing that I think really separates the SEC from everybody else. There are a lot of people that love their college teams. But in our conference, it's like there is this esprit de corps in many respects. Like when I travel, like I love being able to interact with fans and, hear what they think about their team, but your team as well. And there's a lot of knowledgeable fans in our conference. And it's great to be able to get out and get on shows like this. And, I think I'm easy to please, man. I mean, I kind of know where we stand a lot with Mississippi State football and baseball, and we're awfully proud of what we have, but at the same time, too, it's always a pleasure to be able to represent Mississippi State University to your fine fan base.
Well, I really appreciate your time. And those who want to read more of Steve Robertson can do that at genespage.com. Or he has several books out. Most recent book, not quite sports related, Blooms of Oleander, but you can read all kinds of Mississippi State coverage with Alpha Dogs. I didn't turn my speaker off today. Right before I was listening to your recent episode, and I didn't turn my speaker off today. You can read him with Alpha Dogs, Flim Flam, or Stark Villains to get more of a sports coverage. And you obviously have extensive experience in the business, and I appreciate your expertise. You came highly recommended by my friend Ryan Fowler.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've been on with those guys a few times, and it's such an honor too. I mean, yeah, I like the fact a lot of people think of me first. It's like, hey, we need to talk Mississippi State. Let's call Steve Robertson. I'm not the pretty boy in a polo shirt. I never aspired to do that. Fortunately, I get to work for myself. And you mentioned all the books. My sixth book is coming out here in a few weeks, and it's about my path to recovery. I've been clean and sober now almost 32 years, and so kind of just basically telling people how I did it, why I did it, and why I continue to do it, and why they should too. So that'll be out. And you can get all my sports books too at whenthebottomfalls.com.
Excellent, and I encourage all of our listeners to do that, and follow your path. And really, that's a great message. Something that I'm striving for as well. Not as consistent as 32 years gone by, but it's a very encouraging message that you put out right there. We're here to talk about Mississippi State, and obviously, people who've been following Mississippi State over the last year and change, lots of transition going on in Starkville. Obviously, tragic passing of Mike Leach, and that's a horrible, really terrible story. I'll actually get you to start right there with maybe your memories or what Mike Leach meant to you, only in Starkville for about 3 years, but just what do you take away when people say the name Mike Leach? What's some of the first things that come to mind?
Well, he's a genius, and he really changed, the college game and really the NFL game. A lot of the concepts they're running in the National Football League are the air raid. That's an important aspect of all this too. And so he was an innovator, but more importantly, I got to know him more as a person, and I had so many people that covered Washington State after Mike took the job and said, dude, you're the luckiest guy in college sports to be able to cover this guy every day. You don't even realize it yet. And I thought they were just being silly, but it's the truth. I don't know if I've ever been around a more genuine person than Mike Leach. And he did so many things behind the scenes to help other people and didn't do it for Instagram, didn't do it for the tweet. And I found out a lot of these things after he passed away, because he did things for the right reasons. And there's so many people nowadays, a lot of them because they have publicists and marketing people in their ears. It's like anytime you do anything, I mean, like if you shake somebody's hand or buy somebody a paper, you got to tweet about it, Right. He's not that guy. And, I had a chance to spend a lot of time with him kind of privately, just kind of sitting around talking football and talking life. And he just saw the world in a different way and knew a little something about everything. And what he didn't know about, if you knew about it, he wanted you to educate him. And we spoke a lot about recovery and, college baseball. And it's one of the things, like when the very first time I interviewed him, he spent 30 minutes interviewing me about, the Hugh Freeze situation, and all the stuff that happened with that. And he was a very inquisitive guy. He wasn't just a guy that wanted to dominate the conversation, but, and he was a guy too, I tell you. So after last year's Alabama game, obviously State really wasn't in the game. State competed, but the outcome went pretty much as we expected, and State finally scored a touchdown, but Mike was like so fired up about officiating, and it wasn't just like the Alabama game. The officiating didn't determine that game. Talent did, right? I mean, let's just all call it for what it is. But there have been some calls that have gone against State. You had the fumble, the punt situation in Memphis where State downs a punt and they let them return it for a touchdown. It was like this crescendo that came after the Alabama game. So I was actually in the complex and Mike is like, hey, I got to take this call. So I step outside and he tried to get me to stay, but I didn't. I just went around the corner. And he's talking to the SEC office about the tape they sent in. And he goes, listen, I'm just going to tell you guys this. The SEC office says you're here to explain this to me. So as long as I'm here at Mississippi State, you can expect that you're going to have a lot to explain to me. I'm just not going to take your word for it. And he goes, I don't know how they've done it here in the past or how everybody else in the league does it. But if you guys make calls that cost us a football game, you're going to hear from me. And if I'm not happy with your explanation, I'll go to Commissioner Sankey if I have to. And it really made me proud. I just shared that story recently on our page because he was willing to fight for Mississippi State. You know, it wasn't just a situation where, hey, I'm here to collect a check and ride off into the sunset in Key West. He was working hard to help Mississippi State, and he wanted the program to be respected, not just by fans, but the league itself.
And I heard the very beginning that maybe the very beginning of your Boneyard episode that maybe the league wasn't very happy that he was sending in so many plays. But shoot, if you're the coach and you feel like something's gone wrong against you, that's what it's there for, to submit your plays and fight for your team. I'll transition right off that to one of the other conversations that you had on the Boneyard episode this morning, and you guys can check out the Boneyard on all the podcast platforms, just like mine. And you talked about really the officials and the way that they've kind of affected the Alabama-Mississippi State games over the course of the last handful of years, most notably probably the Calvin Ridley, was he out of bounds, is he in bounds, this, that, and the other. And me as a listener and graduate of the University of Alabama, I'm not from Alabama, I'm from Chattanooga, Tennessee, so I didn't grow up an Alabama fan, but over the last 10, 15 years, I came here as a freshman in 2008, obviously grown a lot of affinity for Alabama, and made me think, the calls go both ways, this, that, and the other. I'll just give you a chance to, because we don't often hear the other side's perspective. Everything is, always Crimson Tide, and everything Alabama does is A-OK and perfect. What's your thought process, or what has been the Mississippi State feelings about the officials affecting the Mississippi State-Alabama game?
Well, the first thing I got to say is I don't know that they've affected the outcome in either of those games. And that's the thing. The point that I made to Herb Vincent in the SEC office when I wrote a big piece a couple of years ago, and I sent them like 25 questions, and of course they really didn't want to answer those questions. But and like I told Herb, I said Alabama doesn't need any help. That's the thing I think you guys need to understand. It's like, what's the difference in Mississippi State losing 38-14 and 38-7? I mean, just call the game for what it is. But I go back to that 2017 game with Calvin Ridley. There is no question he was out of bounds of his own volition. Jalen Hurts scrambles and does a great job, and Ridley breaks loose. He runs out of bounds of his own volition. And then the son of a former Alabama quarterback throws his hat down to signify that he goes out. Of course, Ridley's down at the 1. Ridley himself, after the play, looks back and is like, he knew it. But instead, we call a force out and gives Alabama a 1st and goal situation. That was a 3rd down play. And that's the 2017 game that Mississippi State should have won, Dan Mullen's last Alabama game. And I pointed out today in an article, Alabama's the only team Dan Mullen never beat in the SEC. Then you go the next year when Dedrick Johnson from Mississippi State, Colin Hill dives into the end zone, and there's Jeff Batts that throws the flag. There is no contact. Shaheem Carter dives trying to make a play, just an effort play from Carter. He dives of his own volition. And that's a kid from Amite, Louisiana I've known for a long time. And so Thomas has his hand up, and Batts throws the flag, and it nullifies the touchdown. Now, State lost the game handily anyway. But just call the game, man. I mean, it's like all these things continue to happen. There's always 1 or 2 egregious calls in these ball games. And listen, let's be honest about it. I mean, Alabama is the most dominant program that this conference has ever seen. I think it's a disservice to Alabama for these officials at times to make calls that appear to be helpful to Alabama when they don't need it. I think that creates this air of conspiracy. And I don't know if there is one, but, one of the things that I pointed out is that I found this is the thing they didn't want me to talk about. So I found a bunch of social media postings of family members of the officials on Ken Williamson's crew. And that was one of my questions that I sent in is like, what's the league's policy on social media? And they contact somebody else that knows me well and said, what is he getting at here? Well, they didn't know what I had, but I got a picture of a particular official before the Arkansas A&M game in his black and white, taking a picture with his wife who's wearing Texas A&M gear before he goes and calls that game. Now, I don't care who you are, who you root for, or what you think about that. We can't have that in this league. I don't care what your alma mater looks like. If you are affiliated in any way with another program, you shouldn't be calling their games. I mean, that's just the appearance of impropriety. And I don't think that the officials decided that ball game, but it's a bad look for the league. And so everybody's like, oh, they don't have social media accounts. Well, I found them. So it's like, if I can get a sitting head coach fired over a phone record, I can find a coach or his wife's Instagram account. Give me a break.
Well, let's move right into that because your book Flim Flam basically outlines the Hugh Freeze scandal at Ole Miss. And before we get really into Mississippi State, I just want to hit on that real quick. Well, obviously, I encourage everybody to read that. It's very, very juicy and exciting. But how surprised are you? The pointed question is, how surprised are you that Hugh Freeze, based on everything that you reported and you wrote in that book, Flim Flam, that he was allowed back in the SEC and now obviously he's at Auburn? And then what do you think his ultimate outlook or outcome will be at Auburn?
I think he'll do well there. I mean, no matter what you may think about Hugh Freeze and his past, the guy can coach offense. I mean, you just go back and look at the 2 games he won when he was at Ole Miss against Alabama. The thing that he did is he coaches those teams up to have no fear. And they clearly had no fear of Alabama, and they won both of those football games. And, I think the bigger win is probably the 2015 win because you beat them in 14, right? Ole Miss wins that game in Oxford. You've got a year to get ready, and you get them in your backyard, and you still lose the game. I think that's arguably the biggest win in the Hugh Freeze era at Ole Miss. But, listen, I got my own opinions about a lot of stuff, but Hugh Freeze and I have actually had some correspondence this year. I mean, after he got the job at Auburn, and listen, I wish the guy well. It was never like some investigation into Hugh Freeze. I'm covering the Ole Miss thing, and I've got everybody in the in-state media telling me I'm a liar, that they're not under NCAA investigation. And so here I was. That's basically the pursuit of it all. Is like there was this major NCAA investigation on Ole Miss football, and the in-state media was complicit in the cover-up. That was the focus of my book and everything else. In the middle of all that, we uncover all this stuff that led to to Hugh Freeze being, resigned at Ole Miss. But no, I have I got no ill will in my heart towards that guy, man. It's like I've been sober as long as I have, and I've learned not to live with resentment because he never did anything to me, And I think that's important to understand. There's so many people that act like me and Hugh Freeze are supposed to be mortal enemies like a Joker and Batman, but I just don't see it that way, But I think he'll do well at Auburn. But yeah, I mean, I'm not running out to have lunch with him or anything. So,
well, we're here to talk about Mississippi State, and I just want to give everybody a little bit of background as we kind of ease into this conversation. Obviously, we hit the transition right at the very beginning. Unfortunately, Mike Leach passes. Zach Arnett is promoted as basically kind of interim head coach for the bowl game, and then he becomes head coach. Now he's 2-2. He's changed the offensive system, and the defense has not looked that great through 4 weeks. They're 90th in total defense, 120th in passing defense. What's been, in your opinion, the reception through 4 weeks for Zach Arnett? And really, my question is, why did he get his first head coaching job? Was it just the easy hire because he's the defensive coordinator and there's no offensive coordinator? And then what do you think his motivation was from saying, hey, we've been running the air raid, we've been recruiting the air raid for the last couple of years, but hey, let me go get Kevin Barbay. He's going to change up the offensive scheme. And now Will Rogers, one of the most successful quarterbacks in SEC history, looks quite uncomfortable through the first couple of weeks. Now better this past week against South Carolina, but just kind of the whole thing doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And now obviously not as tied into Mississippi State, but what has been his reception and really what has been his motivation for changing the offense?
Yeah, I think that's really the one thing you look at. Maybe you kind of second guess a little bit is kind of retooling the offense because you had 3 years of implementation of the air raid. You had everybody back, of course, except for Coach Leach. And, I think maybe at the end of the day that Arnett just wasn't a believer in the air raid after coaching with it for 3 years, and it was a ball control offense, but I think they needed to run the football because there was some games last year where, State wore down defensively. People forget that State had to lead in the fourth quarter against LSU in Tiger Stadium last year and just couldn't get a stop late, and they're outscored 21-0 because the defense just completely gassed. And so, but Arnett, we've always known he was going to be a head coach. We just didn't think it would be this quickly, and we didn't think it'd be Mississippi State. We thought maybe he would leave and eventually come back. But, Zach's done a lot of things that are right. And that's the one thing you look at here as a leader is like, okay, I made the decision. It may not have been the right decision. It may not have been a decision that people support. But as a leader, I got to stick with my guy. I got to give my guy a chance to get some roots in place. And Barbay is a guy that's, very well regarded, but, he's got a quarterback. It's not necessarily the perfect fit for his scheme. And I thought last week they were a lot more aggressive. And a lot of this, Will Rogers is a quarterback. And if you're the quarterback in the SEC, I mean, if they mishandle a punt, it's your fault. I mean, you know what I'm saying? If somebody's popcorn is burned, it's your fault, and so he gets a lot of the criticism, whether he deserves it or not. And so I think his offensive line has had some issues at times, and that's a big part of it too. Is you got to be able to run the football, and sometimes he did look like a duck out of water at times in this offense because the quarterback run is just not something that he's going to be able to do. But I thought last week they did a good job of putting him in a situation where he could be successful. He had a big game, his biggest game of the year. Tulu Griffin has one of the biggest receiving games in Mississippi State history, and he's a matchup. I don't care who you are. I don't care if it's Alabama, LSU, Georgia, Florida, whoever. Tulu Griffin is a guy that's going to be a problem for everybody. You've got to find a way to defend that guy, and then if you double him, you've got some other opportunities. But South Carolina tried to double him last week, and he still was able to beat people. And so the question this week is, can State protect well enough to make that an issue for Alabama? State has scored one touchdown, and it's like I think I did numbers earlier. I think State was outscored 120-15 in the last 3 years under Mike Leach. And so a lot of people say, hey, can State even score? I think the way that this Alabama offense has been rather pedestrian, we're probably looking at a low-scoring game, which I think might actually help State. I don't expect State to win this football game, but I don't think it's going to be, a beauty pageant when it comes to offensive efficiency for either team.
I'm going to bring in my boss, Chris Walsh. He's right here in charge of BamaCentral. He's making sure that I'm staying on track. No, I'm just kidding. No, I invited everybody. Usually my Fridays, Steve, are an all-call to the BamaCentral staff, and Chris is ready to go, and so I'm going to bring him in to this conversation. But with that, I'm going to ask about Tulu Griffin. Basically got over the top a bunch against South Carolina, and he has been the main receiving option over the first 4 games. What if, obviously Alabama has Kool-Aid McKinstry and Terrion Arnold. Terrion Arnold, I'm hearing a little whispers that I don't know if he's going to be as available as we would like. But if Alabama takes away Tulu Griffin, or if they double him the way that you might have suggested, who's going to be Will Rogers going to be the next guy up? Or how are they going to be able to get more passing weapons involved in the offense?
Well, I think it's Avion Thomas, and he has not been 100% yet this year. I mean, he's a guy that he got injured in camp. He got stepped on and then got gashed open and had to have his leg stitched up. So they were really careful with him. And last week was his most extensive play of the year. We do think he's another matchup guy. I think this wide receiver room is actually pretty talented. It's just a matter of, can you protect long enough to let them be a factor in this game? So I think Thomas is a guy. Jaden Wiley hadn't played much at all this season. And, that's a big mystery. Why isn't he a bigger part of things? But, Justin Robinson's a big physical X receiver and with a great catch radius. He shows the ability to elevate. So that's a matchup that State likes. It's just a matter of, how often can you get him to football. But, that's the thing about Tulu, though, is the fact that we're talking about him. You got to scheme for him, right? And so they move him around and put him in some mismatches that are advantageous for the offense. And how State has done that really has been formationally. It's like they see what you want to do and where you want to have numbers. So they'll shift some guys around to try to get the matchup that they want with Tulu. And last weekend against South Carolina, they were able to get it just about every time they wanted it. And so I'm eager to see what Nick Saban does, because in years past, Bama's been able to just kind of man up on the corners. But Tulu Griffin has been underutilized at Mississippi State. This is his first year in the slot. I mean, he's a natural slot receiver. He played outside for 2 years. For Coach Leach. And so I think now he's in his more natural position and presents some real challenges to opposing defenses.
Along those same lines, teams line up for the first play. What's the first thing you're looking for?
Offensively for State?
Sure.
I think the first thing they want to do is probably get a running play going. I would suspect it'll be Woody Marks off left tackle or off right tackle.
What's his health going to be like tomorrow? I know he's shaking up. Continue. I'm sorry.
Woody's always shaken up, and so he's a tough kid. I mean, it's like there are a lot of times you look at him and say, people are like, oh, well, he got banged up in that ball game, and you see him in warm-ups, and he's full go. I mean, he's just one of those guys. I think he actually, once he gets a little stinger or something, I think that's when he really gets going. I think he likes to be in the rigor of interior run game in the SEC. He likes contact, and he's a tougher guy, so I always expect him to be good to go. There'll be maybe a non-conference game. They sit him and just let him get his legs under him again. But, they need to get him going. And running the football against Alabama is a full-time gig, man. I mean, that's that front is legit. There's a kid, obviously, the Moses kid from Columbia. Jaheim Otis. He's from my hometown. I played on that same field he did, So I'm a fan. and I know what that kid's capable of. I know where the family comes from. So the fact that he's going to Alabama probably makes him a first-round draft pick someday. I mean, he's that kind of player. But, when Alabama recruits the way they do, nobody's going to line up consistently and run this football right at them. But I think State has to find some success on the ground in order to open up the passing game. On the defensive side of the football, one of the things that we've seen a lot this year is with the mobile quarterback. When State brings the house and they don't get home, the mobile quarterback just tucks it and runs up the middle because State, more times than not, is bringing backers in A and B gap. I think you may see a wrinkle this week, though, when it comes to that, because even Spencer Rattler, who's not really a willing runner, found some success on the ground. And so it's been mobile quarterback every week. And so you hope you're learning a little bit more. But I think what they really want to do is make Jalen Milroe be a quarterback and not just be an athlete, kind of keep him in the pocket, make him throw the football, work through his reads, his progressions. So I don't think you're going to see a ton of, front side pressure that enables him to kind of tuck it and go, because that's really kind of been the Achilles heel of this defense. It's been what happens when guys like Jaden Daniels and Jaden DeLora see things break down and they turn it into a backyard football game. That's what State has to avoid, is not letting Milroe just be an athlete.
Does State like to use a spy in that situation?
Sometimes. And that's, a guy that you guys may know, they're pretty familiar with, Marcus Banks. I've suggested that's the guy, right? I mean, that's probably one of the fastest guys on the team. And, this game's going to mean a lot to that kid, and so, I won't be the least bit surprised on third and long if State doesn't drop a little more in coverage and then spy the quarterback, just because of the fact that, they brought zero coverage and been beat on it a handful of times this year in very, very big plays. And like you look at last week's game, as tight as that thing was, I mean, it's a 3rd and 13 play. The play is over. Rattler is giving himself up, and Buki Watson's running him down, and just so happens gets his hand caught in the shoulder pads and gets flagged for a horse collar. It was absolutely the right call. Absolutely the right call, but it's just an unfortunate situation. It's like the guy's going out of bounds. There's nothing there, right? But instead, they get 15 yards, they go down and score, make it a 14-0 ball game. And then later in that ball game, Woody Marks goes in and scores, and it's called back on a Rylan Gode hold, and it was the right call. Yeah. Well, next thing you know, the next play, Will Rogers forces a pass and gets it picked off.
That was a bad call.
I agree, but we can't throw that football anyway, right? I mean, you can't force. There's nothing there. But yeah, I agree that when they reviewed it, they should have overturned it. But that's within State, right? It's not, you can't if you want to really advance in this league, you can't blame the other team and you can't blame the officials. You got to find a way yourself to make the football play. And that's what State should have done there. I mean, at the very least, you get a field goal, and maybe it's a different ball game in the fourth, because, you look at that second half, and I talked about this on Monday's show. Everybody talks about how bad the defense played. I thought the defense was terrible in the first half. Mm-hmm. Well, in the second half, you give up a 75-yard touchdown, a one-on-one matchup. They get the look they want. Rattler makes a big throw. Leggett runs it in, right? They had one sustained drive the rest of the half. They get the second touchdown off that BS call and that incomplete pass that they called a fumble. And I still haven't heard. I'm sure we got a letter like they give you when they screw up your dry cleaning. We're sorry. We're sorry. We'll try to be better in the future. That was a terrible call. And it ultimately cost Mississippi State the football game. But the reality of it is defensively, they actually played pretty well. You give up one drive that ends in a field goal, and then you get the you get the long touchdown pass. But all those points count. But I think there's some lessons to be learned from that. At halftime, they made some adjustments that, while they didn't take root on that very first play, I think defense played pretty well. But you've got to be able to overcome adversity in this league, and especially against a team like Alabama. You can't go out there and shoot yourself in the foot. You can't go out there and make silly penalties and stupid turnovers.
All right, so I want to go back to your Woody Marks and running the football, and I think that is going to be a big key to this ball game. When I watched the LSU game, there's a lot of zone stretching out and trying to look for that cutback lane, looking for the hole, and LSU's athleticism and power basically kind of shut all that down. Is there going to be a counter? Is there going to be a different strategy running the football? Because Alabama athletically is very similar to LSU. And so I wonder, and I'm watching that, I say, that's not going to work against Alabama. What would you suggest, or do you think there's going to be a different strategy implemented in the running game?
Well, I think there has to be. And I think that's the lesson that Barbay learned against LSU is, running these slow developing plays and running that stretch play and things like that. I mean, the zone read stuff kind of works when you've got, a mobile quarterback. But I think you've got to have some different packages this week, because Alabama will do exactly what LSU did this running game. it's just like they talk about, insanity being the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. It's not going to change. And if you thought LSU was ready, Alabama will be even more prepared because they've seen that it works. And so I think you have to add some new wrinkles. I'm not sure what they're going to be. A lot of people have been calling for Mike Wright to get some more snaps. I'm in favor of that, but I think it's got to be, you got to pick your spot. I don't think it could be, okay, well, he's going to get the third drive no matter what.
Right.
But I think one of the things, and I even talked to Barbet about this in media, is that, Mike's got to throw the football. This guy was an SEC starter. He beat Kentucky and Florida last year. And you saw against Arizona, every time he came in the game, they were sending 6 and 7 as an all-out run blitz, and they basically negated his influence in the game. So you got to hold people accountable. You've got to put those linebackers in conflict. And I think the best way to do that is to, let them come on that run blitz, and you just hit that quick slant across the middle. Who knows how far it goes? But, State's got to give people something else to prepare for. And I think you have to hold the defense honest by making Mike more of a dual threat, not just a running specialist.
And then on the flip side of the ball, you've talked on the Boneyard podcast about Alabama's struggles at quarterback position. Very valid. The last 2 weeks, Spencer Rattler and Jaden Daniels have gone 88% for 650 yards and 5 touchdowns. Now, last week, Ole Miss basically ran rush 3, spy 1, drop 8, some sort of combination of that defense. And now it limited the big plays, except for two big plays for over the top to Burton and over the top to Jalen Hale. But Jalen Milroe goes 80% completion, 225 yards, only forces the one ball into the end zone on the interception. Zach Arnett said it earlier. If you're in zone coverage deep down the field, no matter what, it becomes man coverage. If you get far down the field, it's always man coverage. What can they do to correct the passing defense? 120th in passing defense, haven't really challenged. I think Jaden Daniels is a really good quarterback, but I'm not really all that sold on Spencer Rattler. Milroe kind of in between there, or maybe closer to the third in the skill set of those three. How are they going to challenge Milroe if they sit back and drop 8 coverage and he runs 4 yards a pop on a scramble, gets it or dumps it off and gets a couple yards? What do you think the passing defense can do to correct its missteps so far through the first 4 weeks?
I think part of the issue is that State has had to blitz so much to generate a pass rush. And so they've become kind of predictable in that respect. And they've left those corners out there on an island. I think what you have to do is disguise the coverage just a little bit more. Make Milroe think, make him second guess himself, and then maybe you can get home with the pass rush. But, if you're sitting at 5 and 6 against Alabama, you better be able to tighten it up outside or it's going to be a big play. We saw that when, Jalen Hurts, how many times you go into zero coverage and Grantham just brings the house. Well, they pick it up. You're a sitting duck out there. I think State has to, number one, maybe not bring as much, 5 and 6 man blitz. I think you change some things up. I think you got to do some front side pressure to kind of get Milroe's thought process sped up a little bit. Maybe he rushes a throw or two. But if you sit back there and let him pitch and catch, even as pedestrian as his numbers have been, he's going to pick you apart. He'll just check it down, or he'll take the tight end out. They can simplify his reads. But I think State has to disguise coverages to put him in a decision-making process where he second guesses himself a little bit. Because the last 2 weeks, every time somebody drops back to pass, you expect it to be a completion. I kind of joked privately with some friends. I'm like, hey, I can tell you who's probably going to be the consensus SEC player of the week this week. It's going to be the opposing quarterback against Mississippi State, because State is not, even when State was able to get a lot of pressure against Arizona, DeLaura is able to tuck it and go, and he still threw for 345 yards. And so that's probably been, we knew that safeties were going to be a real challenge. That's why State, went to the portal so hard this year, but we didn't think it'd be this difficult. And, of course, mobile quarterback after mobile quarterback, it just breaks all the rules, right? Your rules say, hey, you're defending here against a deep third. Well, now all of a sudden, I got to go chase this guy, So the linebackers at State have got to do a good job kind of corralling things up and preventing those big quarterback runs.
Steve, real quick question on, SEC schedule is obviously changing. Alabama's not going to be playing Mississippi State every single year. Just what's kind of the feeling among the fans there about this rivalry is, I don't want to say it's going away, but it's obviously going to be different.
Well, we're absolutely heartbroken that we don't have to play Alabama every year. Let me just say we're absolutely emotionally destroyed that we don't have to play Alabama every year. Listen, we got a lot of respect for the Tide. We got a lot of Alabama. We got a lot of walk-on Alabama fans over here in Mississippi. I mean, so, listen, no, all due respect, but it's one of those things. It drives me crazy. I don't like all these bandwagon riders. I got some friends back home that were State and Ole Miss fans their whole life until all of a sudden Nick Saban start winning. It's like, I've always been an Alabama fan. Yeah, roll Tide, baby. But no, I think it's good for us. I mean, see, the story that I always tell when I'm asked this question is like, what's your perception? Who's the better program, Kentucky or Mississippi State? I'll ask both of you guys those questions. Who is the better program, Kentucky or Mississippi State?
State.
Yeah.
Now, but the national media will tell you it's Kentucky. And one of the reasons why is because they were able to beat up on Vanderbilt and Missouri, and for the last few years, South Carolina. Let them trot their butts into Bryant-Denny Stadium every other year and then get back to me and tell me what a great coach and job they've done in Kentucky. At Mississippi State, nobody ever feels sorry for us. We got to go play in College Station. We got to go play at Tiger Stadium. We get Alabama, Auburn every single year. And in addition to that, we get arguably the most bitter rivalry game in the country.
Yes.
We don't get to go play Missouri on a Thursday night in front of 15,000 people or whatever they pack in there. We don't get to do that. And so, when this whole thing first came up, I can tell you there were administrators at Mississippi State are like, hey, this schedule rotation is not fair. Maybe back in 92 when they rolled it out there, maybe it made a lot of sense. Well, of course, then State wins the West, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, they didn't have to play Florida or Georgia. So, hey, we got to change the rotation. And don't think we didn't know about that, Roy Kramer. We absolutely did, But it's so funny to me. It's like, I know a lot of like the LSU people are like, it's kind of sad that State's not going to be on the schedule. Yeah, cry me a river, man. It's like, we got to go play Florida next year. At least give me a chance to go somewhere different. I mean, it's so weird to me to think there's so many student athletes in this conference that will never know the chance of what it's like to run out of that tunnel at Bryant-Denny Stadium or at Tiger Stadium or at Kyle Field. And that's a problem. That's an indictment on the league. They let it go on as long as they did. I mean, and now all of a sudden it took us adding Texas and Oklahoma to do that. I'm a big Greg Sankey fan, but that's a problem. That should have never gone on as long as it did. When A&M Missouri joined the league, we had a chance to kind of fix some of that. But the fact that like those kids at Kentucky, I mean, I think they've been to Tuscaloosa once in a decade.
Right.
We have not been to the Swamp since 2010, and we play in the same league. How is that fair?
I'm totally with you on that. If you stay 4 years, you should be able to see and play in pretty much every stadium in the league. Obviously, if you go to the NFL, whatever, in 3 years, you do that to yourself, and that's a choice that you make. Benefits come with that as well. But if you stay 4 years, you ought to be able to see most of the stadiums. I definitely agree with you on that. I'm going to throw two questions at you before we wrap you up. We're talking to Steve Robertson of the Boneyard podcast, and you can follow him at Scout Steve R on the Twitter machine or X machine, whatever you like. I'm going to throw two questions. All right, so you're 0-2 in the league so far this year, and 8 o'clock kickoff on Saturday night. Obviously, the Cowbells are the Cowbells, and I want to just ask you the morale of the fan base. Will the Cowbells? Will the atmosphere? I've never been. So we're going to send Katie Wyndham and Austin Hannon and several of our other compatriots over there to Davis Wade Stadium. Tell us. Will the atmosphere be electric for an 8 o'clock kickoff, given an 0-2 start? Will it be a little more like what will it be? And then the second question is, as a Starkville veteran, for the Alabama fans who are going over to Starkville, making the drive, what are some of the must-see or must-eat places in Starkville?
Well, the first thing I'll tell you is that, people are disappointed, but most people expected State to be 3-2 at best after the month of September. We thought South Carolina was a swing game. And I've said on my show countless times that may be the difference in a good year and a really good year. And they dropped that game. I think most people expected this Alabama game to be a loss as soon as the schedule came out because, 15 years in a row. State hadn't won since Sylvester Croom era. Won back-to-back. Take that, John Parker Wilson. But it's crazy to think that, Dan Mullen beat every team in the Southeastern Conference but never beat Alabama. It's like there's this curse, and it makes it worse that Ole Miss has won a couple of games and been very competitive. On the flip side, State's been really competitive against LSU. But, I think a lot of people expected us to be a loss. We do expect there to be a huge crowd, probably the biggest one so far this year. And some of that's going to be Alabama fans, But, we'll see how things go. I joked the other day on my show, Crimson's so close to maroon. Now's the day to take the aerial picture for all the marketing stuff going forward, but yeah, I mean, the ones that are there will be into the ball game. And, I've had a lot of people hit me up for tickets, and other people hit me up saying, hey, I want to make sure these tickets get in the hand of a Bulldog fan. We don't want to put it on StubHub and run the risk of Alabama taking over our stadium, because that's what happened last year with Georgia, and it was an embarrassment. It was an embarrassment to Mississippi State. And a lot of our fans have really kind of reached out and said, hey, don't do that. Eat your tickets before you allow some other team to come over here and take over our stadium. And granted, it's a special thing with Georgia being as good as they are these days. But, you've already spent the money. It's not like, but to each their own. But I would eat my tickets before I sold them to a rival fan. But I do think that it will be a raucous crowd, probably a near capacity deal. And, State's got 8 o'clock kicks. Everybody's got all day to drink some beer and, have some ribs and some smoked wings. And, we'll see how everybody feels at halftime. But, I would recommend, if you got a chance, go to Bulldog Burger Company in town. My favorite place to eat in Starkville is Harvey's. I love going there. I've gone there most of my life. And, of course, there's the Central Station Grill that's not too far from campus. But I recommend all those places for sure. Of course, there's a Walk-Ons not too far from campus. And that's an LSU company if you guys are okay with that. But I can tell you the red beans and rice is fantastic. But
the food's good, yeah.
It is. Yeah, no matter who's paying for it, it's I want to eat. But yeah, we have a great time. And listen, we're real proud of what we have here at Mississippi State. And my wife and I are opening up a business in town. And that's one thing that I told her whenever we first started talking about this. I'm not just a Mississippi State guy. I'm a Starkville guy, and I want what's best for our city. And not just be a consumer of the Mississippi State brand, but to be a contributor to our community. And there are a lot of people in this town that are very civically minded in that respect. Like, they could have open their businesses anywhere, but they chose to do it here to make Starkville a better place. And we are fiercely proud of what we have. We just may not have as much as everybody else, but we'll fight you for it. I can promise you that.
Well, we've been talking to Steve Robertson of the Boneyard podcast and of jeanspage.com. You can read all his books. You've got Alpha Dogs, you've got Flim Flam, you've got Stark Villains, and the newest book, Blooms of Oleander, a poetry book, a group of a collection of poetry. And Steve, tell everybody one more time about the book that you are about to put out about your sobriety and journey to where you are now.
Yeah, that's When the Bottom Falls, and you can find it at whenthebottomfalls.com. I also, wrote the book about State's NAFL championship in 2021, a book called Dogpile. And I don't know if I'll ever have one as successful as Flim Flam, here's hoping, but the newest one is basically my memoirs about, I got clean and sober December 10th, 1991, and I hadn't had a relapse yet. And relapse is a big part of some people's journey. It hadn't been for me, and I'm living proof. A lot of people think, well, you can kind of flirt with this thing. You can't. This is a matter of life and death. And, had it not been for the love of a good woman and the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'd be dead or in the penitentiary. And that's not hyperbole. That's the truth of the matter. I mean, I'm 6'2", 215 pounds right now. I checked into rehab at 6'2", 146. And I was so far away from where I needed to be that any step I took was in the right direction. And there were so many people that gave up on me, but I didn't give up on me. And God didn't give up on me. And at the end of the day, I would have moved to Alaska and lived in an igloo if that's what it took to get better. And thankfully, I didn't have to do that. I got to go home to my home state of Mississippi and find some recovery. But there are a lot of people out there that are hurting these days from addiction, and it's become so accepted in today's society. It's almost like, well, we can't fix it and we don't want to deal with it, so let's just kind of excuse it. And there's still this stigma about drug addiction. There's so many people that are afraid to really ask for help because they, it's like I'm from small town Mississippi, and I've never been anonymous, right? And so it's like as soon as I went to drug rehab, my mom couldn't wait to go tell everybody, oh, he's going to rehab, because it made them feel better. But the reality of it is this, I wasn't anonymous when I was out there in all those bars and, chasing all these women and doing narcotics. I mean, so why would I be anonymous now? Why would I not be transparent now? And there are some people who love me that wish I wasn't quite as transparent, but I'm alive today because of a program of recovery. And it is my responsibility to share that with other people to help the still suffering addict.
Good deal.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure to talk to you today. I'm going to thank Ryan Fowler for the connection. I hope you have a great weekend. We'll send some of our colleagues over to see you in Davis-Wade Stadium, and I hope to catch up with you soon.
You guys take care.
Thank you, Steve.
Yes, sir. That's Steve Robertson joining us on the Joe Gaither Show. You can read his, or you can listen to his podcast, the Boneyard podcast, on all the podcast platforms, and follow him on the Twitter machine at Scout Steve R. We're going to welcome in the two stars. We're going to make our show, 2 times smarter now with Katie Wyndham and Austin Hannon. You can make sure you follow them at Katie Wyndham _ and Austin Hannon _ Katie, what was your biggest takeaway from Steve Robertson, and what are you looking forward to this weekend in Starkville, football-wise or non-football-wise?
I was just on there for the tail end of that, so I didn't get to hear all of it, but I was liking his message there at the end. And also, I have been to Bulldog Burger before in Starkville. Now, I don't know if tomorrow on a game day weekend, if it's going to be best for us to try and venture to a popular Starkville establishment. I don't know what the wait times will be, but I was going to say I am looking forward to the trip over on 82, but 82 is not always my favorite place, so we'll see.
It can be a sketchy highway sometimes. Austin. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
I've lived in Tuscaloosa since 2004. I've had one ticket, and it was coming back from Mississippi State. So
both tickets I've ever gotten have been on Highway 82, not between Tuscaloosa and Starkville, between Tuscaloosa and Montgomery, but same highway. You know?
Okay.
That's exactly what I was getting at by saying sketchy. Like, you got to watch your speed limit, and
perform.
They'll get you out there. Austin Hannon, I think you're in the middle of a drive or at the moment. Are you doing okay? And we'll check in with you. How's your week been, and what are you looking forward to in Mississippi State tomorrow, football-wise or non-football-wise?
Can you sorry, Joe, can you repeat that? You've broken it out there for a second.
Oh, we just wanted to check in with you, see how you're doing, and see what you're looking forward to watching the Bulldogs and Crimson Tide play tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm doing good. And I think there's a lot of things to be excited for. I mean, I think the most important thing and the most excited thing that fans are probably about is, can Alabama take what they did in the second half last week and kind of expand on it? That's a way to put it, or just do it again. I mean, they looked dominant in the second half against Ole Miss on really both sides of the ball. After Jalen was able to clean things up on offense, and the defense was good all game, everything kind of clicked in the second half. They forced turnovers, they limited penalties, they blocked well, and everything was kind of going the right way. So I think the big thing this weekend for Alabama is doing just that, and seeing if they can expand on a great performance last week against one Mississippi school, and then go on the road and do it again. And not just that, but this is a big game for Jalen Milroe. I mean, I don't think it's been talked about enough that this is his first ever road start of his career. And even if you had started at USF 2 weeks ago, I mean, it's not going to be the environment that this will be. So how will he respond to that? Can he continue to build on what he's doing these last couple of weeks? And if so, I think Alabama's got a good chance.
It is his first road start, but he did get some significant road snaps and kind of what became a tight situation in Arkansas last year.
In Fayetteville, yes.
Which that crowd started to get real ramped up around that time. But yeah, this will be kind of a new thing.
Do you guys think, Chris, we'll start with you. Do you guys think that Jalen feels a little extra pressure seeing how successful the 4 quarterbacks have been against State so far? The State's played 4 mobile quarterbacks, and they've torched them pretty much without resistance, either through the ground or the air. As I said earlier, 88% completion for Jaden Daniels and Spencer Rattler combined. Does that make Jalen Milroe feel a little extra pressure to kind of match what those guys have done?
No, I don't think so. It's for me, this is good timing for Alabama to get A&M and for Milroe in particular. I think the fact that he was named the starter, everything went fine last week for the most part. I think that really takes the pressure off him as a whole. So the fact that they are facing a team where he could have some success, I think it's going to be the opposite. I think this could be a huge confidence builder. And I want to see if they're, I kind of jokingly put it on a social media thing last week about, here's the game plan, run, throw deep. I think we're going to see more of that. I think we're going to see more of that this week. And so I'm curious to see how they're going to be trying to build on that. But yeah, I think this is perfect timing for him.
Katie Wyndham, we've had really Alabama's most successful half of play last week against Ole Miss on both sides of the ball. The defense has played pretty much lights out through 4 weeks outside of the fourth quarter against Texas, but the offense actually looked in sync, in rhythm, ahead of the sticks. Do you think that that's going to be something that continues, or do you think this week of practice, things shake up? What's going to be your prediction for the Alabama offense tomorrow?
I think it is going to be something that continues. I think it helps that they're playing Mississippi State. It is their first, road test. I mean, they did play at USF, obviously, but kind of a real road environment this week. But we've kind of seen, because I did the How to Watch for Mississippi State on Sunday of this week. And so when I was just looking through the series history, there's been, since Saban lost that first year in 2007, and then obviously Alabama's won every other game, there's been 2 games that were decided by single digits, and most of them have been blowouts. And a lot of them have come directly after losses, like 2 years ago after the A&M loss, a lot of times after, because it used to be, this game was always the second weekend of November. So if Alabama lost to LSU, they'd play Mississippi State right after. So it's kind of been like a get right game or a figure things out game. And no disrespect to Mississippi State, obviously Saban's respecting them a lot. He said multiple times this week he thinks this is the best team they've played outside of Texas. But I think this is a good team for Alabama to kind of get this first road game. I don't know if jitters is even the right word. I don't know if they really get nervous, but to kind of to build on what they did in the second half last week for the offense to be able to figure things out for the offensive line. I think obviously there's some questions there about, what they're going to do at left tackle between Proctor and Pritchett, and still kind of figuring out the best starting five there. But because to me, I think we talked about this last week, to me, that's the key of this team is how the offensive line can play. And we saw them looking a lot better in the second half last week of not giving up any sacks. And obviously part of the sacks is on.
That's all right. We're going to move on to Austin real quick as she reconnects back into our stream. Austin, Scoops Hannon, 2 weeks in a row, bringing us the injury scoops. How big a deal is it going to be without Deontay Lawson and without TJ Ferguson?
Yeah, I think Lawson's obviously, I don't think I'm saying anything crazy, saying he's obviously the bigger.
We're saying goodbye to Austin as well. Internet issues on the road. That's no problem. Oh, there's Katie Wyndham right back with us. All right. You're okay. You're okay. We'll jump into it. Look, there's 7 SEC games. Every SEC team is playing a conference opponent this week. We'll hit the other 6 real quick, and then we'll wrap this bad boy up with a little Alabama, Mississippi State prediction. We'll start with 11 a.m. There's 32 11 a.m. games. Katie, Florida is going to Kentucky. Kentucky, a 1-point favorite. We don't have to play the lines right here, but what do you think about Florida going to Kentucky?
I don't know. That's a tough one because Florida obviously had the good win over Tennessee a couple weeks ago, but had really rough start at Utah. Kentucky hasn't really played anyone yet, and when they played Vanderbilt last week, they gave up some points. So I think even though it's at Kentucky, I'm going to go Florida.
There we go, Chris Walsh.
Yeah, I'm normally like when in doubt, you go with the home team, but in this case, I think Florida's got something going a little bit. This is one of those that's going to go right down to the end. This is going to be like a 1-2 point, maybe 3-point game. But in this case, I'm going to take the Gators.
Austin Hannon, we're reconnecting you right here, and I don't know if you heard any of that, but we moved on to SEC predictions or SEC games, and then we'll wrap up our conversation back with Alabama, Mississippi State. Florida is on the road to Kentucky. Kentucky, a 1-point favorite. It sounded like Katie took Florida, and Chris, did you check Florida as well? I was focused on the back end. I'm sorry. So 2 Florida picks. Austin, what do you think about Florida going to Kentucky?
Let's switch it up. I'm going Cats. I think this game's interesting, too. There's a lot of interesting games on the SEC slate this weekend, being the early one, 11 a.m. Central kickoff, which I think is going to help Florida a little bit. Kroger Field's known to get a little wild and rowdy at nighttime. So Kentucky fans they'll have a few hours early that they'll have to do that this week. But I just think that we've maybe gone too far on Florida just because of the one win over Tennessee a couple weeks ago at home where Florida did look really good. They dominated Tennessee on the line of scrimmage. A lot of Tennessee's flaws that were maybe being hushed over the offseason kind of got exposed. And because of that, Florida got a lot of credit, as they should. But I still don't think this Florida team is exactly where we think they might be. Obviously, they're in the top 25 now, but all you need to know is that they're underdogs against Kentucky, who's not ranked. And Kentucky really hasn't played a single meaningful opponent this year, and I don't think they've been great overall. But I think this is a spot where the country kind of realizes, the SEC kind of realizes, okay, Kentucky is a pretty good team. They're still a little bit ahead of Florida. We might see a little bit of a better performance from Devin Leary at quarterback, the NC State transfer, who's been pretty quiet so far this year. I think he might kind of have a little bit of a coming out party.
So Austin's taking Kentucky, and I will join Austin taking Kentucky as well. We'll go 2-2 for Big Blue, and the other two for Florida. We'll go to Dallas. We'll go over to Cowboy Stadium, Arlington. Texas A&M takes on Arkansas. A&M a 6-point favorite. No more Connor Wegman out for the year. Katie Wyndham, how are you feeling about Arkansas and Texas A&M?
Yeah, this is a tough one because if you look at Arkansas's upcoming schedule, things don't really get easier until the back end. Their next games are at Ole Miss, then at Alabama. So after this, they already have 2 losses. So I think this is kind of I don't want to say must win, but for them, so I'm going to go Arkansas. And I think Texas A&M could maybe be looking a little ahead at Alabama. So,
Chris Walsh, how you feeling?
This game's always really weird. The Arlington game. It's one of those you sit there and go, I can't believe what I'm watching. And it usually goes back and forth. I think losing Wigman's going to be pretty big. I really like Max Johnson. I think he's underrated. And in that respect, I don't think they're going to lose a lot. But I'm kind of with Katie on this one. It's Arkansas's kind of been shooting itself in the foot. I think I'm going to be really ready for this game. I think if I was going to pick straight up, I'd probably take Texas A&M, but the line's like 6.5, somewhere in there. I'm taking the points.
There we go. Austin, can you hear me? We're talking Hogs and Aggies. All right, goodbye. We're going to talk to Austin later. Austin, we'll catch up with you on our staff call in just a little bit. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but focus on the road, my man. We'll catch up with you here in just a little bit. I'm going to go. I'll go Arkansas. I'll go Arkansas as well because I think that losing to BYU, having a close game, I think they're going to get over the hump and take down Texas A&M. And this will be a game that Jimbo drops, and this will help everybody get on the Alabama train the next week and overhype Alabama. I'll go Arkansas as well. We'll jump to 2:30. Good old class. Oh, what is it? Good old. The Deep South's oldest rivalry. That's the name. Georgia is going to Auburn. Do the Tigers have a chance, Katie?
I don't think so. I think last week we saw Auburn playing kind of a real opponent for the first time and saw how dire their offensive situation is. I mean, Jordan Hare will be pretty packed out because it's a rivalry game, so that may get them a few points, but not anywhere close enough to win.
Chris, are you giving Hugh Freeze any chance for a little Jordan Hare voodoo?
I want to. I mean, it's their home. Hugh Freeze is kind of known for these kind of games and pulling some surprises. Georgia seems to be kind of on a slow build, and a lot of that has to do with their schedule. I think they're kind of looking for an excuse to really kind of show, hey, yeah, we're legit. So yeah, I like the Bulldogs.
We'll go 3 for 3, Georgia Bulldogs. All right, 3:00. Missouri is going to Vanderbilt. Missouri is still undefeated. Oh, are they going to be the best challenger for Georgia in the East? Katie Wyndham, as Missouri keep it going?
Yeah, I think they're going to keep it going this week as far as them challenging Georgia in the East. I don't know about that, but yeah, why not? Let's have Missouri get to 5-0, keep climbing up in those top 25 polls.
Yeah, I'll take Missouri too. This is going to be a high-scoring game, probably lots of points. It's perfect for Missouri.
Brady Cook and them boys going to win. The Missouri Tigers, you'll hear Eli Drinkwitz for sure again in next week's Silly Sound. He's been a star 2 weeks in a row. We're going to keep it up. 5:00, LSU goes to Ole Miss, goes to the Grove. Does Lane Kiffin bounce back, Katie Wyndham?
This is a tough one. Also, I didn't realize that this game was on ESPN before the Alabama game, so meaning the Alabama game is definitely not going to start at 8 p.m. Probably at 8:15.
9 o'clock.
I think I'm going to – well, I don't know because LSU – I was listening to that LSU-Arkansas game last week when I was driving back from Bryant-Denny on the radio and then caught the end of it on TV. I mean, Arkansas could have very easily won that game. and it was in Tiger Stadium. So I'm going to go Ole Miss at home.
Hotty toddy, Chris Walsh.
Yeah, we've got two coaches that are trying to get their team's attentions, and you know what? Lane got called out by Feinbaum this week, which normally I'd be like, yeah, whatever. But Lane's due. You know what? And the game's at Ole Miss. If it was at LSU, I'd say LSU's going to win hands down. I'm going to pick Ole Miss in this one. I think they're going to stun them, and we're going to have Kelly mulling around all over again. If not, it's Feinbaum does the same thing next week. It's like, oh, Ole Miss, Kiffin looks bad. Yeah, whatever. Okay, Paul. Good luck with that.
I wasn't very impressed with Lane's approach to last week's game, to be honest. And more so, I wasn't really impressed with Pete Golding's approach to last week's game. They stayed in that drop eight, rush 3 the whole time and never really did anything to mix it up on Jalen Milroe.
I don't think they felt like they matched up.
Nah, yeah, I agree. But still, it just didn't seem very creative. Like, okay, we don't match up. Well, you're going to have to do a bunch of different things. I don't know. I'm going to go Brian.
Respect for the Alabama secondary, or maybe when Lane started praising Terry Arnold, that jumped out to me big time when he was like, "Hey, we went after this guy last year. We couldn't do it this year." When you have opposing coaches start talking, after they play, giving you like talent assessments like that, I always really listen up. So, I thought the Alabama secondary was going to be pretty good this year. I think it might be better than we realized.
A lot of big debate so far on Twitter this week. Who's better, Kool-Aid McKinstry or Terry Arnold? And I think you're basically splitting hairs right now through the first 4 weeks. I'm
still taking Kool-Aid.
Probably so. But Terry Arnold's come on. He's come on pretty nice.
No, he's done really, really well. And, the thing was, it's when he came in, it was he's going to be a safety kind of thing. And the fact that he stepped in and he's played corner, he's given him that second really tough guy to throw against on the outside. It's made a world of difference. And like when we were talking to Steve earlier, when he was saying, I don't know how they're really going to, try to match up one-on-one kind of thing. I think Mississippi State's going to have a lot more trouble throwing than people realize. They're going to have to do a lot of underneath stuff and so forth.
Absolutely. We're going to move on to the last non-Alabama game. South Carolina goes to Tennessee. Katie, the Fighting Shane Beamers are an 11.5-point underdog. Will they beat Tennessee for a second year in a row?
Yes. I like the underdog pick.
I like it. On the road in Neyland Stadium, God, that'll break their hearts. Chris?
I'll take the balls, but not to cover.
I'm kind of with you right there. I don't really think South Carolina is that good, especially up front on the offensive line. I think that's going to be a struggle.
And here's the thing: it's Milton physically is obviously really, really impressive. I just don't. The Tennessee offense isn't clicking. For whatever reason.
He's not very dialed in. Yeah. All right, we're bringing Austin. We're bringing you back in because it's time to pick Alabama, Mississippi State. Chris is exempt. Well, I do want Chris's kind of analysis over the game, and we'll do that last. But Katie Wyndham, 14.5 points. The Crimson Tide. What are you thinking about Alabama going to Starkville? 8:10 p.m. officially. Probably going to be 8:15 or so. What do you think is going to be the matchup and the outcome?
Clearly, people don't need to listen to me if they are actually betting on this, because the first week I picked
entertainment purposes only.
The last 3 weeks I've been wrong. Week 2, week 3, I picked Alabama to cover. They didn't. So last week I picked them not to cover. They did. I do think Alabama covers this week at Mississippi State. Kind of like what I talked about earlier is just most of the games in this series haven't been close. It's been opportunities for Alabama to kind of work things out and in a good way and have some momentum. And no matter what Saban says, I don't think this Mississippi State team is that good, and so their past defense has been really bad the last 2 weeks. So I think Alabama will be able to score. So I think Alabama wins the game and covers.
All right, so I'm going to go with you. I think that Alabama wins the game and covers. I think Mississippi State's going to have a hard time scoring. I watched all 4 of their games this week, and LSU is really smothering them on defense. I think they're just going to have a really hard time scoring. And, Alabama, yeah, you only gave up 3 to USF, throw that game out there, but you held Ole Miss down. Jackson Dart's a pretty good quarterback. I know Quinshon Judkins wasn't completely healthy, but neither is Woody Marks, the Mississippi State running back. I'm taking Alabama. I'm feeling somewhere in the 35-10, 35-13 range to cover and win the ball game. Austin, we're going to test your internet connection. Katie and I both took Bama to win and cover. Are you in the same boat, or are you going to go underdog? Yeah, we got you. We hear you.
Yeah, I think they do. There's a couple. There's a few reasons. I think they're really funny. Will Rogers, this will be his 4th start, I think, against Alabama in his career. And the first 3 have been very, very poor. I believe the number is 0 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. So whatever's working.
Excellent. He took Alabama to win and cover. Chris Walsh will get your overall analysis on the ball game. No picks for you as the editor-in-chief, the owner of BamaCentral.com.
Yeah, I think Alabama found something in the second half against Ole Miss, and it's going to be something that they can start building on. So this is obviously the first game afterwards, and we're going to kind of see, some little tweaks and so forth. But we have the beginnings of an identity, and it's nice to see after the talk that we heard going into the season about how they wanted to play in a kind of a style, and then we finally saw some of that. We're going to see more of that, definitely. And so, Alabama's got a lot of talent. They got to, it's every single week is going to be tough from here on in, and they just got to build. And hopefully, if there's one opponent really for the rest of the season, if I'm the coach, I'm a little scared about. I hate to say it, put it this way, looking past a little bit, it's this one. So that's the big concern. That, and of course, the nonstop cowbells that everybody loves to, talk about in Starkville. But it's night game. Get your popcorn. To steal Lane Kiffin's line.
We will be on site. Many people, 4 or 5 people in the booth at Davis Wade Stadium. 5. Katie Wyndham, Austin Hannon. We'll have Matthew Gibson. Matthew Gibson's going over there, correct, and Will Miller. Yep. And Edwin Stanton. There's your 5. You can make sure you're following Bama Central. Blake Byler. Sorry, Austin. I appreciate. Sorry, Edwin, and sorry, Blake. So it's gonna be a great crew over there. You're gonna be able to follow everybody at Bama Central on the X Machine, at Bama Central SI on Instagram, at Alabama Crimson Tide on Sports Illustrated on Facebook. We're gonna have all kinds of coverage, but make sure you're subscribed to the newsletter at BamaCentral.com. You'll get all the access and all the coverage. At Katie Wyndham _ will be our lead and taking Katie's going to pack earplugs for everybody. So we appreciate everybody watching us on the Joe Gaither Show today on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, right here on Bama Central. You listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon. Tell a friend about the program. We'll have another fun week next week. We'll recap the Mississippi State win or loss on Monday, and then we'll see whatever we can get into with Texas A&M on deck after that. But first, it's Mississippi State weekend, and you're going to follow it at BamaCentral.com. We will have 5 people in the booth covering whatever Zach Arnett has to say and really covering all the goings-on from the Alabama Crimson Tide perspective. So we appreciate everybody watching and listening. We'll be back with another episode of the Joe Gaither Show on Monday right here on Bama Central and Bama